Okay, so this may not look terrific, but Shar, this is a good way for you to hear me. And I know we've been talking a little bit about your creative process and how it developed through the years and all of that, but I'm looking at your new work and I'm seeing, and forgive me if this is incorrect, but just sort of from my perspective, I'm seeing a structural component coming in that seems like a big leap forward. And the prior work is amazing and beautiful, and this is another leap forward into some structure that is really compelling. Can you talk a little bit about that? Is there something you can tell us about that?
Sure, yeah, I think that what you're seeing ties into one of the things that I finally figured out is okay for me to accept in my work, which is the fact that as much as I try to be abstractly and to not think of any deep ideas or concepts ahead of time to work intuitively, inevitably there is something figural that'll kind of come up with the shape that I present. And instead of like turning my back to it or instead of ignoring it, I really been embracing a place, and I think that that's probably what you're responding to. The nature always organic, my marketing approach. I love layers. Obviously, colors work, but I think the structure that we use now are pulling together a little differently than maybe they have in the last 4 days that I've been doing every hour. But so the figurative element that's definitely breaking.
Yeah, that was very interesting to me, and it's exactly as you say, that there's this, obviously from a layman's perspective, we're looking at abstraction, but there's this structural element which seems like it's very much out of the academy and very much about the figures. So it's interesting to hear that that's kind of where you are. Tell me a little bit about, how you begin versus how you finish, and this idea of getting yourself out of the way so you can make the painting. You say that at the start you really think too hard about the finished piece, with the exception of color. Can you speak a little bit about how you get yourself into a space where you can just create without thinking too hard?
Yeah, it's actually not that hard. The white canvas does it for me. I submitted, I've got the blank canvas. I think a lot of artists can relate to this. I don't find it a bit frightening. In fact, that's kind of, the moment that I enjoy the most is start. But I very random. I have the canvas on the floor and I'm throwing paint at it. I'm really not thinking at all about what the painting is going to look like at any point. Things I do start with like a black gesso, and I'm, very abstractly throwing paint on the canvas. But at a certain point, it starts to, after a lot of marks come together, I hang it on the wall, and what I notice is that I'll start to see these figural kind of shapes, and I then get out, like my fine charcoal, and I start to define those shapes, and I think, that process, by me embracing that, has really allowed me to connect to nature, which is, my biggest influence, obviously, but it just kind of guides me as I work to not overthink anything and to just let the shapes happen. And it's kind of the same with color, like you had mentioned. I do think about color a little bit ahead of time, but it's only in like the abstract. Like maybe today I want to work on something that's really a warm tone painting, and that's kind of it. There's no pre-mixing. I work and mix my colors right as I'm working. And sometimes, like that particular piece you're looking at now was really interesting because I had never used those together, but they just, they were just so engaging and, kind of took me through the whole piece. So, there's not a lot of prior planning or anything that goes into it. It's very intuitive and spontaneous.
I'm just looking at this piece that we're in front of, and at the risk of being self-involved, this is my favorite piece in the show. Was that a wow?
Yeah, no, it's like an It's actually one of the pieces that I did towards the end, and it was one that excites me a lot. There's some shapes in there that are kind of keep coming up in my work lately, and so I like it too.
I'm glad. So tell me about the special relationship to Lake Michigan, and through that lens, tell me a little bit about how you don't capture realism when you're facing, you're influenced by nature, and the natural influence is obviously a huge piece, but you're also saying that you approach the real in a way that allows you to negate the real. Can you talk a little bit about that contrast and how that is for you creatively?
It's, you mentioned Lake Michigan. I grew up in Western Michigan. I live in Chicago. I lived in Minneapolis. It's like I circled the whole lake somehow. I do a lot of plein air painting in Wisconsin. So it's a very Midwestern thing, but there's just such amazingly beautiful landscape that I've grown up around and been surrounded by for my entire life. And I think, I do a fair amount of plein air painting, especially in the summer. And being out in nature, anybody who's painted plein air, totally relates to this, but the amount of smell, shape, the wind blowing, the sounds that you hear, whether they're, it's just the leaves rattling or, even birds and things. It's just amazing to me that when I started painting abstractly, because before this, you had kind of mentioned Atelier, I had a figurative painting career and was never really happy. But when I switched to abstract, I just couldn't believe how that organicness of nature, things were popping up that I recalled seeing or that I grew up in, the color of the lake, the color of the sunset. It wasn't that I was interpreting what I saw, because very rarely do I have a horizon line. Sometimes there'll be a horizon line, but rarely. But the colors, primarily, are so influenced from what you see in nature, and the shapes. And so, that ability to bring that in to the painting in my studio, which is very urban, got train tracks, and I'm right in the middle of a very urban area. It's just, I get lost, and I can almost hear those sounds and bring those moments back. But again, I don't translate them into what I see. But you'll oftentimes recognize shapes that are familiar with things we see in nature. The one on the left, that's the blue painting, obviously, I couldn't get away from that. It's a bird shape, and I fell in love with it, and I couldn't get rid of it. So sometimes I'll paint over areas if they're too literal. tree or something.
Just an interjection there, Shar. When you say too much information, are you saying in terms of your relationship as an artist to the process, or in terms of what you're anticipating is going to be seen by the public?
I think it's how I relate to the image on a whole. You know, to me, is it going down a path where it's being too blatantly they always walk up and say, oh, I see something, I see a bird, or I see, you know, a tree limb, or, you know, rocks or formation or water. And I may or may not see it, and that's okay. And so I'm not so worried at all about what the viewer sees or says or interprets. I think everybody has to be able to connect to a piece of art on their own, and it's really me connecting to the work and feeling comfortable with it.
I think that you've given a very clear perspective on all of this. I just wonder if there's anything else you'd like to share specific to the show, your interest in the concept of intuition, how you're bringing that to this show. You know, anything else you'd like to talk about specific to this new body of work?
No, I think, you know, I didn't talk a lot about color, but in this particular piece you're looking at, I think, you know, color again, I did a lot of color study, and I really, you know, formally trained in knowing and understanding, you know, how to use color. But I find that, again, a lot of that stuff just goes out the window because it's such a moment where something is working and you just know it, and so it's a feeling. And that kind of leads into, you know, something I've been thinking about a lot is, you know, what is intuition and what is painting, you know, just in the moment and from your heart. I think that, you know, it's really what suits me, and I'm just very happy that I finally figured this all out. It's taken years of experimental pieces with all different mediums and things, but you know, when you find that way to communicate, I think it just, you know, it sets you at peace, and it allows you the freedom to create, and just, you know, every piece is a new piece, and every piece is exciting, and I would say I'm just enjoying the...
Well, we're very excited that this is the evidence of the culmination of a great deal of work over a period of many years on your part. We're very excited that the show is up. It's exquisite. And we're looking forward to opening it tomorrow evening at 5 p.m. at New Art Gallery at 670 Canyon Road in Santa Fe, New Mexico.